Jesse, cue it up. Everybody in their places. It's time to go.
Are we rolling? Yeah, we're rolling. Okay, let's get it done, everybody. Let's go.
Hey, Ragan, how's my hair? Is it okay?
Poxy, they can't see you.
All right, come on, goats, toots, people. Poxy, start on page 4. Get the lines right this time.
Right, I got it this time, I swear.
4, 3.
Come on. It's time for the Ghost of Hollywood.
Well, hello, wall crawlers, and welcome to the 42nd episode of the Ghost of Hollywood. I'm Poxy Leonard here with Miss Ragan, and tonight we have legendary cinematographer Andrew Dunn in house to discuss his recent work on the film Killer Heat, starring Joseph Gordon-Levitt.
But it doesn't stop there, because Andrew has DOP credits writing all the way back to the film Chattahoochee. Remember that one? And if not, it's a film where Gary Oldman goes postal after returning from the Korean War and shoots up his neighborhood. Then he gets locked up with Dennis Hopper for the long haul, which is where the story picks up.
Oh yeah, hell of a synopsis, and that's a hell of an early film for sure, but I love the old Hopper. Anyway, rest in peace. But one of the early quintessential films Andrew DOP'd, which became iconic in U.S. cinema, is none other than, that's right, The Bodyguard, starring Whitney Houston and Kevin Costner. But the list really goes on and on, and he's done a lot of movies. I mean, ranging from several BBC films, most notably Threads, which is one of 3 BAFTA-winning films Andrew has worked on as director of photography. He's also worked on industry-defining effects films such as, and you hearing me right when I say Monkeybone, yeah, more on that later, or the constantly moving and ever-pleasant film Gosford Park, which Andrew notes as one of his personal favorites.
Fast forward, and he's added the incredible United States vs. Billie Holiday, Downtown Abbey, and the book club films to his filmography. And there are plenty more where those came from.
Yeah, you really aren't kidding. I mean, the list is just extensive. So, to give you all an idea, from what I'm, just reading here, we have Love Again, Detective Pikachu. You thought I was going to do it, didn't you? It was like...
Oh, you're Pikachu?
Pikachu. Anyway, Detective Pikachu, Keeping Up with the Joneses, Hello Carter, Hot Rod, Crazy Stupid Love, Endless Love, The Perks of Being a Wallflower, Hitch, Practical Magic, The Crucible. I mean, basically more movies than I've lived days.
And you're old, so that's a lot.
Just a few minutes in and you've already got shots fired.
Shots fired, facts, whatever you want to call them.
I hate you, Ragan.
Which means I'm doing my job well, and you're probably about to get fired again.
Again?
Well, yeah, again.
I mean, what do you mean again? I didn't even know about the first time. Now that I think of it though, you could make a cool shirt or something. It's just Fire Poxy Leonard in all caps.
I'd wear one.
Oh, I bet you would, Ragan. Anyway, we also have Simon and Lennox in house to bring us another terrifying segment of the cinematic dumpster fire.
And tonight is all about the disastrous and deliberate flooding of the 1928 film set Noah's Ark. And now, I know y'all are thinking that's taking it a bit further back than usual, but the story is absolutely crazy.
Yeah, for real. I guarantee anyone listening to this segment heads straight to the old tube for a visual after they get the understanding going on of it. And there are plenty of videos in the movie itself, obviously. But anyway, Ragan, I have a confession to make.
Oh, what'd you do?
Well, I stopped into the production room last night, and Lynn wanted me to listen to the mix from their segment, and I pointed out what I thought were some pronunciation errors and gave this long spiel about how Cy would have known the correct way to say it if he'd have checked into it first.
And?
He'd checked into it first. The pronunciation was right, and I lost more IQ points again.
Well, what was the word?
Well, it's kind of embarrassing, but... It was Michael Curtiz's last name, and yes, that's apparently how it's correctly pronounced.
Oh, well, way to go, Mr. Hollywood Trivia.
Well, per usual, I learned the hard way that it wasn't Curtis. And now Lennox won't let me in the production room. For real, he made me sit outside in the hall until he was done earlier.
Sucker, I need to get him one of those Fire Poxy t-shirts.
Why am I never right, Ragan?
Because we all need a reason to laugh, Poxy.
Well, at least I'm useful for something.
You wish. When we return, cinematographer Andrew Dunn will join us to discuss his latest work on the film Killer Heat and revisit all sorts of movies he's worked on throughout his extensive career.
And there'll be some tech talk in there. I gotta ask some questions about them lenses and cameras, per usual. All the good stuff, so stay tuned. I'm Poxy Leonard here with Miss Ragan, and you were listening to The Ghost of Hollywood.
Interested in television or movies?
Then check out The Ghost of Hollywood for the best in cinema-related podcast at theghostofhollywood.com or wherever you get your podcast.
Welcome back to the Ghost of Hollywood. I'm Poxy Leonard here with Ms. Ragan, and we're here with cinematographer Andrew Dunn. With a career spanning decades, Dunn has worked across a diverse range of genres, bringing a distinctive elegance and emotional depth to each project. His collaborations with esteemed directors have resulted in visually striking films such as Billie Holiday vs. United States, Gosford Park, and more recently Killer Heat, showcasing his ability to enhance storytelling through rich, atmospheric cinematography. Whether crafting intimate, character-driven dramas or sweeping period pieces, Dunn's work consistently reflects a meticulous attention to detail and a profound understanding of visual storytelling. All that said, Andrew, I'd like to welcome you to the show. How are you?
I'm very good. Thank you very much for inviting me, and I'm really thrilled to be here. So looking forward to this.
All right, we're very much excited to have you here. Now, your career spans a variety of genres and styles, from like historic comedy dramas like The Madness of King George to modern emotional dramas such as Precious. How have you worked to create a unique visual style for each film when the tone and setting vary so greatly between projects?
I think that I think we as cinematographers aim to be objective because that's what we do. We photograph things and stories, as you said in your introduction. But we're always working with different directors, different scenes, different locations, different actors. And I think we then absorb what the influences on us and become, I know this is often said by cinematographers, we become chameleons. We have to be chameleons to adapt and become different people within each project. But within that, we are, of course, ourselves. And that comes through. I always pretend I say I don't have an ego. I subvert my ego to the film I'm working on, the director, the story, writers, actors. But of course, something within oneself, as a cinematographer, photographer, and a photographic storyteller comes through because that's who you are. You can't deny that. And I think that for me, it's people know me very well. Say that it's not very good at describing things about myself, but I think it's the intimacy of the camera as a character within the story. So the camera, therefore the audience, become a character within the story. And therefore, it's almost like the camera, and therefore the cinematographer is cast as a character in the story. So when the audience watch, instead of watching something and objectively, it becomes very subjective. And the audience, hopefully, if we achieve particularly my take on this, my mantra, if you like, is that the audience become within the story. And I think that's part of it's incredible what we do. And hopefully when we do it and it works, or the ingredients come together and this sort of thing happens. But so my way of working, and when I'm operating the camera as well, I think that the way I look at things and tell a story, move the camera, and of course, all of us are different. All cinematographers are different, and then we all could be put in the same room, same situation, same actors, same story, and then we'd all come up with something different. And that's part of the beauty of it, and it's wonderful.
You know, I know. What techniques do you employ to achieve this goal for the audience? I mean, I'm assuming it came about organically, but as the years have gone on,
it does come organically. But I think it's my it's very, very difficult to talk about oneself in the situations. But I think what I've been told about myself, and then observing, as you said, all these films and all this work over many years as if you like a thread through, and I think that is the getting under the skin of a subject, and it doesn't always happen. And of course, some projects, some situations, some scripts, and we work on don't require that. They're very surface, and therefore but even that has a certain joy to it. But so I don't think there's a particular technique I employ. I think it's just is inherent in oneself, and if you can create a situation that is collaborative with everybody, and you're there creating and allowing them to have them being actors, particularly, and the director, to have this space, and oneself, we pick the right area, the right spots, and the sequence of shooting, whether you do a wide shot first and go for close-ups, or you do the close-ups and then develop off that into the whole scene and becomes one shot, or you can do. I've got directors who want to do the close-ups first because he or she believes in the that's the important stuff, and then you do the wide shots at the end, because some of the wide shots at the end. Sorry, some people do a master, so-called master, at the beginning, but then that can get laden down with props and stuff. So then by the time you get to close-ups, it can be you could have lost that spark, that magic. So I think all these things, when we're thrown in, cinematographers, we're thrown in. That I know what I do. I don't work with other cinematographers. I don't know how they work. But I just, I hear from other people, but I can watch their other films. But I think I watch rehearsal, work with the director before we start shooting, as intimately as detailed as we can be, but still allowing that when we get to the set, to allow it to happen organically. So we turn it, hopefully, this is what I call the Robert Altman approach. You turn it over to the actors. We choose our corner, or we might want to be to watch this. And if actors don't want to do what we think they might want to do, we can move to a different corner and observe from there. So I think in a way that also relates to the lighting, because you have to, or don't have to, but I think ideally, prepare and have lights and units and cables and all that stuff in certain places, so we can turn around quite quickly without the actors thinking they're in the wrong place because we stood in one area, they're doing something, and we just that's what they want to do. We can move and do it because they are although we are there as cinematographers, to tell the story through the camera and the film and everything else, is actually the people who really tell this story are the actors, and we are there as a privilege to watch them. So we as well. My approach, going back to your question, is that I observe this as best I can, look at the time, or even if you don't have time. Also, if you don't have time, you can create a situation with prep and pre-lighting that you will. It's almost like pre-not lighting, so you can have enough stuff there to adapt and change. I hope that's answered the question.
Hector, you said there was an approach or a method to it. Was there an actual term that you used for this?
I think it was the organic approach to allowing this. I also see on a location or a set, it has its own. That's the set, the dressing, where the windows are, everything. It has its own. That has its own story to tell.
Yeah.
And when we choose those, it's very important that we recognize that and feel it. It absorbs the same way it can absorb through the cameras that we use.
Oh, I'm understanding you now. So you're talking. I mean, it's really drawing the atmosphere up as much, and then kind of having that dance and everything, getting coordination and syncing with the actors. It makes sense. And
not to get too. And I've been guilty of this, I have to say, but not to get too convoluted or try to be too smart ass about the camera movement at the expense of that becomes like a self-conscious, what I call a self-conscious approach, because then you're drawing attention to the camera and the technique to the audience. Once the audience see that there's some technique involved, I'm saying they can enjoy it, because host of movements where you would just enjoy seeing what we do as filmmakers, and they can write about it, think about it, talk about it. And but I think for me, essentially, is to not get in the way of the storytelling. I think it's in my character naturally anyway, and I think I'm lucky enough to do what I do, and I wanted to do this ever since I was 8 years old. I decided to be I guess then I was a cameraman, I didn't know all the other terms for it, but so I think over the years I've just sort of become this observer, and lucky enough to be able to observe with a camera and share that observation collaboratively with actors, directors, crew, the editor, production designer, costume, makeup, hair, everybody. But then to share that with hopefully 60 million, 100 million people, whatever it is.
Now, you recently DOP'd for the film Killer Heat, which is a shift toward thriller territory. Now, how did you approach lighting and camera movement to build suspense and tension?
Well, it's a very interesting story, because we were set on this isn't from a novella, 108-page novella written by a Norwegian author who most of his stories have been in Scandinavia, and for some reason he decided to write this short story in Crete. Actually, it's written for Crete, based on mountaineering and a family who in Greece, they're not. Some of them are actually Greek, but a lot of them are incomers. But they've become very powerful, and it goes back to old, ancient Greek mythology and Greek tragedy stories, where you have a family, you have twins. Richard Madden plays two characters, twin brothers, and so to get into this location and this space with these actors and understand the history of what's under the soil in the character of Greece, for thousands of years ago. And one of the villages we filmed in is a derelict village, but it's way, way high up, hundreds of feet up in the air, I think over 1,000 feet up a mountain. And they were there. There's people, very, quite a civilized society. They were there, like, I think 800 BC, when people in Britain were still sort of, Romans hadn't come here. We were still sort of not living in caves, but it was very rudimentary.
Primitive times, pre-Etruscan.
And so they have this culture. So what I'm trying to say, and I try to be a bit more shorter now, because that's the background, is to this modern family become part of this ancient Greek internecine intrigue, murder, the brother's jealousy, and then there's a wife and a mother and the father who's died already. So go back to your questions too. One of the things about film noir, of course, is film noir started in the early 1940s.
Yeah.
And having read quite a lot and watched a lot of these films over the years, is that one of the things about film noir is because their resources in the wartime, they didn't have the resources. So there were minimal sets, minimal lighting. They shot these things very, very quickly. And it was out of necessity that they looked the way they looked, because you just didn't want to see the sets they didn't have. So they just shot the light dark, really dark and moody. So now we're in Greece. I'm giving you a little bit of background there with the way that film noir traditionally is. You can say that Chinatown, which is set in LA, and they're very hot. I mean, the whole story about Chinatown is that they, it's a family situation, and they, it's a hot desert. So we use Philippe, who's a very interesting director from Ivory Coast, French-speaking Ivory Coast, and done documentary, came out of radio and journalism, and shot a very interesting film called Night of the Kings.
All right,
which is he shot that in a prison in the Ivory Coast. In fact, a prison where his mother was in prison for a year or so.
Oh wow!
And it's a very good story. So he came from a documentary background. So there's my way back. I started documentaries, and then moved into TV films. And
that's what you've been at BBC earlier on when you were. You did a lot of editing and stuff, right? Not to
and editing too. Yeah, I mean, I cut my teeth way back then. We used to go from one project to the next project. And very, very good writers, directors, not a lot of great actors. I was very lucky then. And like Mick Jackson, I worked with. His first dramatic piece was, I think, Threads, which is about nuclear war. And
you won a BAFTA for that, didn't you? Oh, it was that.
It's my first BAFTA, yes.
Yeah. One of three. You've won three, haven't you? Yeah. You've won three.
It's, 3 BAFTAs, and I think nominated 5 times. But so go back to your question about the look and the feeling of Greece, and so Chinatown is a good reference because it's hot, and it's not naturally the way one associates film noir with, which is as black and white films in the early 40s.
Yeah,
but there's a mood, there's a feeling, there's a pace, and they allow, again, going back to the actors, they give that mood. Same with Jack Nicholson and John Huston, Roman Polanski did in.
You're like with the Chinatown. We recently went and saw. You remember that old movie, Sweet Smell of Success, with Burt Lancaster and Tony Curtis? Super noir feel.
Yes.
Yeah, something like that. So
God,
we're in the ballpark. We understand what you mean exactly.
When myself and the director, whoever else is involved in this discussion, start off on a movie making journey, we can start off with like references and think, we can make it like this or the other.
Yeah.
And once you get involved in it becomes its own piece, and that is so fascinating to me. And I'm going to give you an example of that: The Crucible.
Okay.
Arthur The Crucible, Danny Lewis, Winona Ryder, Paul Schofield, and Nick Heitner, the director, Nicholas Heitner, and I. We talked and we looked at Stagecoach, John Ford's Stagecoach film. If you then and kept that in mind when we were shooting, but if you look at
that's
Crucible,
crazy. Like
you would never. In a million years, you'd never associate those two films together. But it's somewhere deep in there. It is there. So I find that's fascinating too.
Well, what is it about Stagecoach that was it the aesthetics? Because I mean, when I think of Stagecoach, like, I'm assuming we're talking the old John Wayne film with like the classic stunts and stuff going under the wagons and stuff.
Of course, it's a sort of action film.
What is it about that was applicable to the Crucible with the aesthetic of that? Like, how do you make that understandable to me? Because it is interesting.
I think the newcomers on the edge of this vast continent, and with Stagecoach, of course, there's all the action and the gunfights and them getting chased and murdered. And I think the story about the cruise, and I think also probably is the landscapes in there's John Ford, wonderful wide vistas he just loved doing, and it's one of his trademarks. I mean, in fact, in the film that Spielberg made with David Lynch playing John Ford, the end shot, of course, he's talking about the wide shot and the horizon and the thing. So that Stagecoach is a great classic of so many things in the way. We just sort of picked out a genre and we didn't quite know what it was. And if you look at the Crucible, you never really see it in there. But I do think one of the things in Stagecoach is these newcomers on the edge of this vast continent, lost, trying to find their way. And the Crucible, because the story of the Crucible, though, has so many complexities within it. Yeah,
I mean, it's a newer society. It's got, of course, like the communist kind of analogy to it from Miller. But
absolutely, but when these people arrived there, where their village was by the sea, there's a forest. The country was filled with forest. So within this forest was scary, hidden, vast. No, they didn't really know how vast it was back there. So they are on the edge of an unknown world, and I think that there's so many other things. Arthur Miller wrote in Crucible, of course, but I think that is a big essence of the part of the story that you could easily create demons and all these things to try and scare people, kids, and everything. So there's that. I think that analogy within the two stories.
No, it makes sense, especially bringing them forward. Like, so think about like with because you first. I want to ask one question. You know, with some of the in Killer Heat specifically, there are a lot of big shots and stuff, and you employ you use the Panavision Primos for that, right? And you did like some rear net filtering and stuff. Am I in the right ballpark with that?
Yeah.
Okay, so. How is that in influence? Say because you're thinking about like movies like The Searchers with these big images, or Ben-Hur, that have these big images. How was it when you were shooting with the Panavision? What was that like?
Those lenses, which we don't think of them as being vintage,
yeah,
because Primos were sort of brought out by Panavision. I sort of think it wasn't that long ago, but actually they were I think it came out in the 80s, so it's sort of 40 odd years ago, so they're on the verge of being prima. The Prima's got the verge of being vintage, and I think to take the edge off them, to use the nets, and there are certain Primos which we use would have you could put nets. We had rings specially made, different nets on them to put on the back of the lens, plus some coating on the front, and to me there's. Particularly as it's going to get down the road, I'm going to get lost in here, but I think particularly with digital, when you want, because I think film has a natural affinity to the human eye.
Yeah,
I'm not being filmic or what we say here Luddite about what's better and what's worse, and how that's because we use that film forever. It's got to be better, but there's a certain natural affinity with the human. I don't think it's just because of what people used to. I think it's just there's a movement about it, the structure of the grain, but then it is every frame is moving because within the each frame,
Okay.
and so what I'm trying to say is again go back to the intimacy of the audience with us cinematographers and storytellers, is to draw them in through the screen, through the TV screen, whatever it is, cinema screen, and get them in there. The same way when I always say when you tell your kid, 2-year-old kid, putting them to bed, and they want to hear a story. We see them go. It's a simple story, but you hear them, you see them before they go to sleep, go off into this other world within that. And I think what we try and do is get our audiences to succumb to this almost like hypnotism. So bearing that in mind, going back to your question about the nets and the lenses and everything, so I think what I try and endeavor to do, is to give the medium, whether it's film or digital, and it's a little bit easier, dare I say, with film, but I think digital, the challenge is to create another dimension. I think movie film has a natural depth dimension to it, and I think on digital we have to work much harder to create that. And so the filtering for me is part of that, to create a more human aspect to the story, whether viewers are watching. Plus lighting.
How do you light for digital as opposed to, like, say, the depth with the film? How do you approach it with lighting?
I think it's not the only person to say this, of course, but I think it's what I call anti-lighting. It's easier in a way because
there's so much more latitude in newer.
There's more latitude, and you can write a street. I live in a village here, which is 800 people, and with a castle and everything else. So, but even its main street where the hotel is and a couple of pubs has enough lights there, so we could shoot that on digital. But it's a case of what you can shoot because it will allow you to see it and record it, but then to take away stuff because you want to make it more interesting because it's built. It's digital's brain is been taught to want to see everything because digital cameras are the jack of all trades and the sort of master of none. So we have to make, when we put our own stamp on it, is to make it a master, or we are the master or mistress of this particular medium. And to do that, what we call, not just me, is anti-lighting. So I think there's a misnomer when I talk about the main street here, where it is Redditch where I live. You can record an image,
okay, but
so people can think it's much cheaper. It is quicker. You don't light the whole street, but I think it's about taking light away and creating what I call a negative fill. So you can work if you start off where the camera is and put a lot of black silks or black card or flags around the camera,
yeah,
and then so that's what I call anti-lighting. So then from there, throughout the rest of the location, set, scene, wherever you are, then you create the layers within that. So we are trying to create the layers that don't naturally exist in digital. I love documentaries, and of course, when I started out from coming through editing and then through the BBC camera side, I did a whole range, a huge plethora of different types of things. That's was really great for me because you could learn all aspects of cinematography. But I did a lot of documentaries interspersed with dramas and musicals, all sorts of different things. So I love documentaries.
How do you approach working on them if you've had to do it? If since we're on the topic, what is your approach? How does it differ from when you're working on, say, a narrative feature?
Well, you are literally there with a tiny little crew, couple of people, sound person yourself, and you're in these real situations with real people. As actors become real people and become real people in the audience's eyes, and so we all create through the technique and sort of magic of what we do, we create them as real people, and hope the audience believe it, you know. But I think to a documentary, you go into someone's home, sharing their real lives, loves, losses, stories, their work, whatever they're doing. And again, that's a great privilege to be able to enter somebody's life and record. I use the word record, but to it is recording, because you're
you're recording
it. And sharing what they're trying to get across, and that we will share with hopefully a wide audience to have these magic. I also use nice little cameras, minimal lights. If someone's not in the right, you don't really too much lighting, so if they're not quite in the right lights, you just say to them, "Look, can you move over there and sit in that bit?" Then we don't, better. And,
do you still shoot cinema cameras with those mostly, or do you use broadcast cameras at all, or is there kind of some intermediate?
There's a lot of different types. I mean, one of the great things about what we do now is that when on shooting film, there were not many cameras. We could have a handheld Arri unblimped for rushing around some of the shots like Kubrick, running around his cameras on clock or things like that. Or you'd have the blimped cameras, but there weren't a huge range of cameras. But that thing is now one of the great things about digital. You have all these different camera bodies, and a huge number of different types of digital cameras. So if the choices it's absolutely amazing. It's so thrilling, it's so exciting. All different things we use. In fact, just over a year ago, I shot 2 films. My son's a writer director.
All right.
And we did one at 8mm. We shot a film at Super 8.
Oh, incredible! But that was pretty blast.
that was great, because this is horrible viewfinder things. But the discipline of that, and knowing you're shooting film, there's no money. Literally, got a couple of rolls of film, and so that in itself is another edge. I'm always learning every day, every time I make a film, every situation I'm in. Within a day, each set, each location, each actor. So always learning. And when I'm saying that, if you, I think for us, if you stop learning and therefore getting better at what you do, then it's time to stop. But once you think you know it, then it's time to stop. But also going back to the different stuff, so you got 8mm shooting. I know people, David Fincher and people use 8mm. Then 16, I love 16mm. So that's also available. We have labs, and we have labs in the States, but we have labs in London to process film, and the Brutalist was, I think, wasn't processed here, but I mean,
we had just actually emailed. We interviewed Lowell Crawley just a few weeks ago, but prior to we talked a bit about some of the push processing and the different things that they had done working on that.
Yeah, so it's very the types of equipment, cameras particularly, and lights. So when lights have got so much better and quicker, and we can adjust lights from that. I'm walking around the set with
it's not as hot as it used to be with all the tungstens and stuff.
It's not so hard. You have a guy there, or a person, man or woman, next to you with a iPad controlling the lights. You sort of do flags and doors and colours, but even the colour, if you want some particular colour isn't in the spectrum of the iPads, then it's I mean, for us filmmakers, cinematographers, directors, writers, it's infinite, and it's fantastic.
Switching gears, the United States versus Billie Holiday, it makes extensive use of chiaroscuro lighting, particularly in the performance sequences. So, can you talk about your lighting choices and how you balance shadow and illumination to create depth and texture?
Yes. That film we shot on anamorphic film in Montreal. It was processed in Montreal, and I think all the equipment and all the crewing and everybody came from Montreal, and had a really great time there. And Lee Dan was directing, with Andrew Day, taking the lead role, which absolutely is amazing. So you start off with this, again, you're throwing all these ingredients. Lee, I worked with quite a bit, so I sort of know a bit about his personality, but he's quite mercurial. So each day, each situation, you'd go in somewhere and you wouldn't quite know how he was going to approach it.
Yeah.
How to talk to the actors, where you're going to be. So I think that's, for me, the adrenaline of, I think it's part of the excitement for me to work with him is to not quite know. So you want to be sort of ready for anything, but then you can, so go back, that's the overall story. So the lighting particularly, I think it's to create, as I was saying earlier, to create the layers, although in a way on film it's not there already, but it's the basic, what do you call it? It's inherent in celluloid.
Okay.
It will give you a sort of depth. I can tell you more stories about that. But going back to Billie Holiday, I think.
Well, you shot this on Kodiak, on Kodak 35, right? That's the film.
Anamorphic,
yeah,
and which is great. So widescreen, and the whole look of Anamorphic, I think, worked for this film particularly.
Was it easy to fill the background? Like, say, when you have, I know the director does a lot of this. I don't mean to kind of dive into the wrong realm, but when you're filling the frame with anamorphic, there's so much space. There's a lot to put in.
There absolutely is, and it's not. Whereas I shot quite a lot of films, Super 35, it's widescreen, but it's spherical, so it's flatter. But I think anamorphic, it all bends around the corners a bit. So you're going to take, and this is my non-technical thing, but it's my feeling about it.
Yeah.
And what I see and what I shoot. It bends around the corners. You do see more. So, and I think the one of the great things about anamorphic as a widescreen format is it's letterboxed, and one of my things I say is that if you on Super 35, I'm not sure quite a lot of good films on Super 35, so not anti, but you're basically cutting the frame out.
Yeah.
And if you literally look through a letterbox in somebody's house or apartment or whatever, with Super 35, you're looking through the letterbox at something. Anamorphic, a letterbox format, you're looking through, but you're invited in through the letterbox into the apartment, house, whatever, into the story. I think it becomes a much more intimate thing, despite, as you say, it's a wider field of view. But I think even that gives you this human aspect and intimacy with the audience, with the story. But going back to your question, about the lighting, we decided because it sets over quite a long period of time in the 30s, 40s, and 50s, and the sets and locations we had, or they're trying to create southern USA and Canada and Montreal is a bit tricky, but I think because a lot of her life, her life was at nighttime, so it naturally lent itself to these darker areas of life and slightly seedy world. So we could, the challenge, I think we pulled it off, and I'm grateful for you to have observed it just now in your question, is that again, it's lighting the distant areas, and as you get closer to the camera, it gets darker, so you're creating a natural negative and layers and depths and this delineation between the foreground and background, and choosing the focus carefully. So where you are in the frame, you're drawing the audience within. You're not sort of making it easy for them. I think audiences enjoy having to work a little bit. So they're focused on I've got some really great focus points. I will say, do you want to focus on this person, that person, or that thing there, and not this person? And then they listen to the dialogue, they listen to see what the actors are doing, then they can sort of tease the audience in a way.
It's like voyeuristic. Like you're right about that in a way. Like Pat Capone had mentioned this to us one time when he was talking about film in Succession, how you could just look at the wall while you hear a conversation, and it kind of you want to see it, but there's part of it that not seeing it and hearing it in a way can kind of drive your intrigue that way. There's a balance to it, but I get what you're saying.
I totally agree. I know Pat from Quite Long Time Ago, and Pat's fantastic, and I think that's very true. So you, although it's a visual medium, the audio is, for me, is equally important. That you're also not allowing the audience to see what the people are saying or teasing them, but then there are other sensors, like the audio sensors, that are out on really sharper, because you're not just watching a face as somebody's talking, and it's in a way that's sort of lazy because you're giving them everything. And this isn't decrying what actors are doing with a close up or anything, but you're watching, as Pat says, a wall or reflecting a half seen out of focus reflection of something in a wardrobe or a picture frame or something, and then you allow that at the right moment in the story, in the dialogue, you then come around, and the audience are already, you've got them hooked. You've really got them hooked. You know, I used to go in what I call Jack Nicholson's heyday. I always have been heyday forever, but I was much younger, and I used to go to watch a film with Jack Nicholson. I was a huge fan, still am, and I I'm a ticket, walk in the cinema, and I just think to myself, I'm not going to get fooled this time by this guy. 5 minutes in, I'm fooled. He's got me. And I don't know how, because it's always Jack Nicholson. He's always doing this thing, and yet that is like incredible. And I think so. What we do is, hopefully with the techniques we have at our disposal and the art and artifice, and as you said, things like, not always giving the audience what they're expecting.
Yeah.
You can just push them through into, they become more involved in the story, just rather than just watching a face talk.
What were some of, with Billie Holiday in the United States, what were some of the bigger technical challenges with lensing the film, like particularly when dealing with like performance sequences versus dramatic moments? Because there are a lot of big performance sequences that you had to work on as well, like a concert-esque. I mean, so yeah, what were the challenges? Or, I mean, maybe they weren't challenges, but how did you approach dealing with that? And then, like you say, you had an editor's background. So when you're on set and you're working kind of this different dynamic where you're in kind of the speakeasy atmosphere and it's dark and you've got kind of a dusty, warm light, or you're out on the road and you're trying to kind of capture the bus in the 50s and the green versus these big performance sequences that are, just overall captivating in their entirety. How did you see on set to really make where you would see those all kind of gel together through the lens?
Yeah, I think it's a very good question, and there's lots of questions in there. And I think that we, it's great. I just tried my head. I'm trying to work it out. So this is now I'm trying to edit all this together. But I think going back to part of the question is my experience in editing, which at the time I was very young, and I just desperate to be a cameraman, and I thought, what am I doing? Waste my time to be a cameraman. But actually, I was able to make my own films then, and go into the editing suites dead of night using dubbing and get my film through the lab, and I would cut stuff together. We go and shoot stories and cut them together. So I learned so much about.
How are you cutting? Did you cut them on the Moviola back then?
Yeah. What?
Did you use like the flat strip, or when you would cut the actual film? How were you cutting them when you were editing it?
Because I was 60 mil on a Steenbeck or a flatbed, and with tape, tape joins and things. But so I think all you're going to say is, having worked with a lot of first-time directors, I have, and I don't forgive me saying it, but I don't. Use the word guide, but I don't get in the way. I just sort of make sure that what they want is paramount to me, and so as long as I get under the skin of the director in prep, hopefully, that when we're out shooting, I can understand what he or she wants, and then we just have a like mind go towards this thing. Then it can change, of course. So with Lee, what they think they want, what they think they want, what they really want. And what they really want is important. And they don't always, because I think that I believe the naivety, the purity of a director, they don't have to know about all technicalities. And some do, some don't. I think that's where we come in, without getting in the way, is just sort of feeling what they want and then trying to guide them towards it. So I'm trying to get back to the memory, your question about Billie Holiday, I think we would go off and look at these various different locations and find a way of incorporating that particular place, set, location. There were a few daytime scenes, like you say, in the bus and everything, but a lot of nighttime performances in different types of places. So we each of those at Carnegie Hall and a small dive, which is sort of not, is illegal, and the gambling and drinking.
Yeah.
And to get each of those places a different feel, and to make it without being disjointed in the overall narrative of the film, is to give them a slightly different feel. But because we do what we do, including myself, I think there's and again, getting under the skin of the story and the director and the actors, is that you naturally come together in this sort of approach and it is together. It's always collaborative. It has to be collaborative for me. And then we just look at it and think, well, so it's with one eye. I mean, I'm a cinematographer, so I have the camera eye, but we all look at it with one eye, and not always in agreement. We make a film, part of the excitement of what we do is we aren't always in agreement, and then you thrash it out and then come to at the time is the best way of doing it, because it may not be, but that's what we do, and then it becomes something there on film forever and for generations to enjoy. And that's part of the beauty of it. But
look at did you all study a lot of old videos, or was there anything in particular that was the directorial focus from like old footage of Billie Holiday, if there was any that exist, or anything like old recordings in particular, or anything, or written interviews?
Well, they're very, I mean, I was brought up in North London, and my dad loved Billie Holiday, and on Sunday morning he would put these Billie Holiday records on. So it's all part of my, I'm a white guy living in North London, but it's,
well, I mean, it's still music impacts people all over the world. So
exactly.
Totally
so that was part of my world. So when I started working with Lee, and I heard Lee was interested in doing Billie Holiday, I thought, my goodness, well, that's a fantastic. And I can't, it was such a, I think what we do is a privilege anyway. And sometimes it's more of a privilege. I think that particularly, because it meant a lot to me. It meant it's part of my childhood understanding, but I embarked on this. It became quite personal, and felt very privileged to be involved. So I think so for me, that gave it an extra, that particular film, an extra importance and edge to me, to give it what it deserved, the depth, and I could use this phrase, depth and texture, but and what we do with the camera. Then when we move the camera by necessity, when the police are raiding some of these places, we're charging in with them, and the chaos and the bullying and everything else. And other times we're just they're watching, a big close-up on 300mm lens, watching Andra sing Strange Fruit. And it's just one shot like that sends shivers down my spine, of thinking, I'm so lucky I'm doing what I've always wanted to do. Here I am in Montreal watching this fabulous actor, this great bunch of people, and this person is Billie Holiday, and I'm there as cinematographer making part of this magic. But going on to a bit which leads up to Billie Holiday, one of the things, I'm getting away from your question, various questions you asked, is, but all in the same realm, I hope.
Yeah.
Is that going back to, or staying on Billie Holiday, but going back to the performance of Strange Fruit, is that when she gets the preliminary start of that in the story, is that she stops the bus, waits to get off for a pee, goes around the back of the shack and sees there's been a lynching, and she her shock and horror with that, she tries to get out of her head, and we decided to do this all in one shot. So sometimes she walks through the long grass and sees the lynching, and then goes into the shack. And so that's all in one shot, going into this building. And there's a sleight of hand little cut as she goes through the little patch of darkness. But then through that shack, there's a lot of so much of her story, her trauma comes through about when she meets these various people and they're being offered drugs, and back into the kitchen when she's growing up, and out and into this other area there. And we did it all in one shot, and with a fantastic crew I had, and the choreography, which led by Andrew, I have to say. And Lee put these various things in her path, and there's meetings and person trying to give her heroin, and the other situation where she meets these other people. So then she comes out of that, and literally out of, almost like in the same building, she's in this shack, comes out onto the stage at Carnegie Hall and sings Strange Fruit. And that essentially, as the audience is concerned, is one shot. And that's for me, and different lighting styles within that. So we have the exterior day thing, and then goes into the shack, and it's all with this stylized separate little rooms in there. Yeah, and that was on location, not in the set or anything.
How long? What was the distance you had to walk it? Like, if you were shooting it all in a sequence, was it like almost like, it sounds like you're like, it's cavernous. I mean, the way that you view it, it's that way, of course. But was it really that way when you're kind of walking through it?
It is in a way, but it's slightly maze-like, because you could walk through one area and then back on yourself, and you wouldn't quite know what. So the whole intro of that shack really wasn't very big, but because we still created these little vignettes within it, dark areas, so you could go, and that's part of the what do you call it? Like in a maze.
Yeah, I mean, you're like walking through her mind. It's pretty interesting the way that you visualize it and bring it together. But to know that you actually had to structure the whole production to really like scope through this very meticulously, because that's incredibly hard to have to pace through that far.
It's really, and thank goodness for Lee sticking with the vision, because I think, because these things are very, very difficult, and sometimes people would lose the heart or whatever is along the way, and I think, well, it's not quite working. But we are on film, so you couldn't play it back straight away or see it properly. And then, of course, coming out, she had a little costume change in there. So when she appeared on the stage at Carnegie Hall, she's in this magnificent costume, and then we're into this singing Strange Fruit. It's heartbreaking, and within a moment you can have all this within a 30, 45 seconds, a minute and a quarter, or whatever, in any part of a film. You can create a huge ups and downs, and highs and lows of emotion. I think some of the great comedy actors I've worked with, I find that actually extraordinary. They can make audiences laugh, and then within seconds they can bring you to tears. About Steve Carell, and watching him work is just amazing. He's wonderful. I think acting is wonderful, but comedic acting, when they can turn over from comedy to but within some movies have a look, and there's an arc to the look and the story, but it's not, there's not so many notes for their notes, because the story doesn't demand it. But then other times, like Billie Holiday, for example, there are many notes, not me, I mean visual notes, and we can really, without getting, I say, too self-conscious about it, but really search for those highs and lows and wides and intimacy and the light. It was like denying the audience what they might, or we might naturally think they want to see, and allowing them to work. I think audiences actually enjoy working a bit. They get more pleasure out of it rather than everything laid on a plate, like some things are.
All right, it's time for a quick break here on The Ghost of Hollywood. I'm Poxy Leonard with Ms. Ragan, and we are speaking with Director of Photography, Andrew Dunn. Stay tuned. Simon and Lennox are up with the brief segment of the Cinematic Dumpster Fire, and then we'll be back right after that with Andrew. Oh, yeah, to discuss all kinds of things, movies. Yeah, you are listening to The Ghost of Hollywood.
When it comes to making movies, anything can go wrong. And tonight we're here to discuss that on the Cinematic Dumpster Fire.
Well, hello everyone, and welcome back to another segment of the Cinematic Dumpster Fire, right here on The Ghost of Hollywood. I'm your host Simon, here with my man Lennox.
What's up, everybody?
And it's time to tell you another terrifying tale from the depths of cinema's most disastrous on-set events. And for tonight's story, we travel nearly all the way back to the silent era, where we revisit the legendary 1928 film, Noah's Ark. Directed by Michael Curtiz, who is probably most well known for his direction of the classic bogey film, Casablanca. Noah's Ark is an epic film intertwining a World War I storyline with the biblical tale of the Great Flood. It's also known as a part-talkie with nearly 15 minutes or so of synchronized sound, which has an interesting story of its own.
So, check it out. The success of the first ever talkie, as it was called back then, is The Jazz Singer, starring Al Jolson. Vitaphone technology had recently innovated the film industry, so Noah's Ark was actually retrofitted for sound, having initially been shot as a silent film. Although later sound was actually recorded directly onto the film strip itself, Vitaphone was a sound-on-disc system used for syncing audio. More specifically, audio recorded to 16-inch phonograph records were played on turntables mechanically linked to a film projector.
Turning back to the production, there are reports that over 7,000 people were hired in total, meaning that it was absolutely massive. But what we're focusing on tonight is the climactic flood sequence itself, where Curtiz and producer Daryl Zanuck would make the choice to unload 600,000 gallons of water on an unprepared lot of several hundred extras for the scene. Why, you may ask? Well, that's simple. They aspired to realism.
Once the idea was set into motion, cinematographer Hal Moore sounded the bad idea alarm, concerned about the unpreparedness of the extras under the huge volume of water.
Legend has it that Curtiz's reply was that they would have to take their chances. So, as a response, Moore walked off the set of the film and was replaced by cinematographer Barney McGill, with both receiving cinematography credits. So, with Barney behind the glass of Moore, the studio constructed a gigantic water tank, with a volume around the size of an Olympic swimming pool. Spillways were developed to guide the water from above until it crashed down on the set below.
And the production design team also installed various breakaways on set to add to all the ongoing chaos.
But Curtiz made further use by pushing to another extreme. Instead of having prop dummies placed with sections of the set and the real actors placed near the breakaways, Curtiz swapped the scenario around. So when the water finally came crashing down, the chaos that would ensue as parts of the sections of the set start crashing would provide another level of danger that was obviously easily avoided, if Curtiz gave a damn about anything outside of his vision. Once the avalanche of water came crashing down on the set below, actors were swept away. Entire sections of the set came crashing down on them, and camera platforms flooded as the film kept rolling. By the time it was over, several people were seriously injured, including lead actors like Dolores Costello and George O'Brien. 3 actors whose names we're unable to discover also drowned as a result of the deluge.
Interestingly enough, Warner Brothers performed an internal investigation after the disaster and recorded no fatalities.
Yeah, right. Just watch it. You'll be surprised it didn't kill a ton of people when you see the footage. Side note, 20th Century Cowboy star John Wayne worked on this film, and was even in this scene as an extra. Apparently, this is something he brought up frequently in earlier interviews, and ironically enough, some of Stagecoach was filmed in Monument Valley, just like Noah's Ark, but years later.
So, what happened as a result of all of this mess?
Safety regulations, my friend. The beginnings of several new safety regulations. I mean, this is the same era that they were firing live rounds from machine guns on the set of gangster films. Old Hollywood knew no bounds, dude.
600,000 gallons of water? What the hell was Michael Curtiz even thinking?
Not about the actors, that's for sure. Anyway, this has been another segment of the Cinematic Dumpster Fire right here on The Ghost of Hollywood. For more information on this disastrous deluge that occurred on the set of Noah's Ark in 1928, well, just watch the film and that will show you everything in real time. But anywho, until next time everybody, I'm your host Simon here with Lennox, and stay tuned because when we return, Poxy and Ragan will continue their conversation with legendary cinematographer Andrew Dunn.
Interested in television or movies?
Then check out The Ghost of Hollywood for the best in cinema-related podcast at theghostofhollywood.com or wherever you get your podcast.
We touched on this a bit earlier, but are there any particular aspects of a director's approach to a film that you find inspires your own creative work? And what is your process when collaborating with a new director?
Very good question. I think the collaborative process is doing prep. We try to get under the skin of the director, and for me is to understand who they are, why they're doing this story, what it means to them, what they want to achieve from it, and I then hopefully will be, as I said before, like on the day of shooting. A lot of this stuff comes naturally. You don't start. Well, I call it scratching your head or trying to work out how we can do it. But you do, because each situation is different, and each day and half day is different, because you want to. And things aren't always what you expect them to be. I think I don't know whether I answered the first question properly or not, but I think for first-time directors, I work with first-time directors, and there's a great joy in that for me. They don't know what's not possible. They don't know what is not possible, and therefore it's like the Orson Welles thing. The Orson Welles said about being a director is like the best train set in the world. That phrase, but it's sort of, and you don't want to. I would hopefully never say to a director, well, you can't do something. And I said my crew always, there's no such word as can't, because there's always some way of doing it. They want to have this time constraints and things. But so for first-time directors, there's a great naivety and joy and simplicity about it, because they're so enthusiastic, keen what they're doing, and that comes. It's what's the word? It sort of excites all. The whole crew excites, and sometimes they come along with something that's crazy, it's impossible. But then you sort of, wait a minute, there is a way of doing this. If we do this and then that, we're still going to cost what he wants, and hopefully we can do exactly what they want. But I think that one of my phrases is they don't know what's not possible, and it's very refreshing for me, because it lifts you up, it takes you on a springboards you out of what you think you got to start. You think, well, with this we can do this, and the other, and the actors are going to sit around this dinner table and do that and the other, and then something else happens on a set on the day, and this magic happens. And it could be, as I say, first-time director who's just something, well, I want to do this. Why can't I do that? Of course you can do it. So just of course you can do it. Absolutely we'll do it. So that is, for me, one of the things about first-time directors is to understand who they are, what they want, and then they may know a lot about what I do.
But do you ever play off of, and I don't mean this to sound pernicious, do you play off of their naivety ever? Say if they do, like when you mentioned Orson Welles earlier, with like Greg Tolan playing off of Orson Welles' naivete of lighting and some of the Citizen Kanes being a very like classic example. Do you ever, but Tolan was just like, hey, let him move him around. Let's see what he does. Do you ever, you seem like that's kind of a big component of this for you, is just like seeing what they do. And then that bounce back, absolutely. You kind of learn, so to speak, which way to guide them based on that?
Yes. You hit the nail on the head there. I think, because then I hopefully I never get set in my ways, but I think one can, and you arrive in certain situations with the crew and everybody else, and I think somebody fresh comes in and you realize what is actually, you can do this, and it's the naivety and lack of, but it's the story, as long as the strength of their instinct and passion about the storytelling is paramount. That if and this excitement, this passion is invasive, gets through to everybody in the crew, and then they're really good leaders, and then that gets under people want to go to work in the morning. They want to be part of this. But it's so easy. I've so many crews who are just, it's another job. And then they, just so always say, keep their nose clean for this job and stay employed, and then wait for the next paycheck sort of thing. But to have, when you can smell this passion getting throughout the whole crew, and you're on something really exciting. You want to come to work with you, want to do something. They come up with ideas, and they can. I always say when I'm with things, you say that if you're sitting on an airplane 5 years after you made this movie, and you're looking over someone's shoulder in the aisle next to you, and they're watching one of the movies you worked on, and you're just looking at it. You can't hear anything, but you're watching this movie you worked on, and you can be the person who came up with that idea, that suggestion.
You put a lot of suggestions out there, then, Andrew, because you made a lot of movies.
I think there's a lot of It's not just me; it's like the prop guy, who saying, "Well, it's his cinematographer and the director stand this, wondering how he could do this." And the prop guy says, "I know how to do this." And there's that Billy Wilder story, whether it's true or not, but he's wandering around the set at 11 o'clock at night, wondering how to shoot something.
Yeah.
And the next day, the guy sweeping the floors says, "Oh, Mr. Wilder, but why don't you do it this way?" And he says, "Oh, wow, that's a good idea." And yes, but that's one of those apocryphal stories which.
Oh no, Billy Wilder, especially, as long as you don't tell Charles Brackett, he'd have been all right. No, you're.
Sorry, just
no. Go ahead.
There's the truth in that, because you've got to be open. I think that for me, the best directors are the ones who have their vision, their single-mindedness, their belief in it, know the story, but they're still open to everybody coming in and saying, "Oh, what about that?" And not they've got to be guarded, but at least you've got to be inviting, because everybody wants to be involved. If they can be, that you get much better out and make a better movie.
Do you know Robin Vidgeon worked over at Pinewood Studios? He worked with Douglas Slocum for years. Did Hellraiser stuff. He was a cinematographer.
Yes,
still around. He's still around. He talked a lot about working with like newer directors, exactly like you are now. And do you ever run across any friction or difficulties, and you kind of see them walk down the wrong path, and then they have to back it up, and you're like, well, do you have to kind of say, we'll let them figure it out empirically a little bit?
I think there can be a bit of what's the word, defensiveness, if they're aware that their lack of. For me, the lack of knowledge doesn't matter. As long as they have that passion, the truth of the storytelling, and they have a passion for it. So I think some people can, because it's Kevin Costner said in his Oscar speech way back when that directing is a very lonely job, and everyone, it's like the emperor's new clothes. Everyone, yes sir, yes ma'am, and but actually within all that, everybody is saying yes to you. It's very lonely, and so I think sometimes they can get a bit defensive about what they don't know, and feels everybody's watching them what they don't know. And I never want to allow that to happen on a film set. But if that does happen, they can see them going down this road of being unsure, but they're worried about looking unsure,
being vulnerable, so to speak.
Being vulnerable, and you want to sort of just either hug them or hug them metaphorically and say, "Look, actually, let's just try this and see how it works, and we can do this next scene we're shooting later. We have 2 hours for. We can shoot that in 45 minutes. Just try this now and see if it works. Play with it, And then that's how they learn. I know it's an expensive school to be spending hundreds of thousands of dollars and learning something, but out of that, you don't know what's not possible, because you want to encourage them to do what can appear to be not the orthodox way of doing something.
Yeah, but it sounds like if you can, you kind of garner their comfort. I mean, you sound like you're with open arms. So once they get comfortable, so to speak, with you, I'm sure that vulnerability becomes something that you can, they can capitalize on with themselves if you allow them to. Now, we got to talk a little charm for a minute here. You've won a lot of awards, but particularly 3 BAFTA awards. Which one's your favorite? 1985, 1986, or 1989?
Well, Threads was the first one, and that's Mick Jackson. We've had a very well, Mick for a long time now, but we had a very collaborative, creative, and wonderful partnership. And from Threads, which we shot, I think 117-minute film. We shot,
and these are all for the BBC, correct?
They were mostly the early ones, and we shot that about 17 days.
Oh wow, that's
of course, it doesn't sound so much now because we shoot films.
No, 17 days sounds fast. That's crazy.
That was pretty, and what we had to achieve the nuclear war. So anyway, that's by the way. But Mick, so Threads was a great, lots of techniques in there that and Mick. Talking about editing, Mick came out of editing out of documentaries, and I learned so many tricks from him about what you didn't need. And he was such a smart guy. And then of course after Threads, so I did a whole bunch of films after that, including LA Story and The Bodyguard. And
how was shooting the bot? That's what I wanted to ask. And I'm digressing. I apologize. How did
you answer your question about Baptist? And then, I hope Mick, whether Mick listens to this, but he'd understand this. But a TV series, it was 5 or 6 hours altogether.
Yeah,
called Edge of Darkness.
Yeah, there was Edge of Darkness, and then Tumbledown was the last one.
And Tumbledown with another director I then formed quite a long relationship with. But Edge of Darkness was with Martin Campbell, who again I learned a huge amount from. Back then, also it's a very, very, very interesting story. It just has relevance now about this. How many years later it's now, but it was about humans, us. We get too heavy here, but us humans destroying the planet, and that was way back then, and it was relevant then and relevant today. So that's one I'm very proud of, particularly. But going to you asked me about The Bodyguard, how that was.
Oh, I didn't mean to. But before, more essential question. I'd be like, well, but you said you took away a lot from working on Edge of Darkness. What did you take away most essentially in your work in cinematography, working on that?
I think with Martin, who had a very interesting, Martin Campbell subsequently had a very a wonderful career with Zorro, and he reinvented the Bond films. And he had a very interesting background from New Zealand, came to England and came to London and was he told us that he pushed a dolly around on live TV and had to memorize on live TV 119 moves. So the reason I'm saying that because his own schooling and what he'd learned along the way in his drive to become a director, a big time director, which he was. I mean, there's some fantastic work, and I was very lucky with him particularly on that. When one or two. One particular prestigious thing before that, but I think that particularly is one of my things when I say that you can. There's a certain time in people's lives when you throw them together, and they, through their experiences, age, life, whatever it is, and some magic, some of this thing comes out. And you could do the same thing a year later, same story, same location, same actors, everything, all the same people. A year later, it wouldn't be the same. But there's something about people put together at a certain time. And that Edge of Darkness was one of those experiences. I think it just happened with the producer we had, Michael Waring, and the fact that Michael Waring got Eric Clapton to do the music. And then Martin himself was... stand by the camera with earphones on, and we were on say 85mm lens or 50, whatever it was, but he could, we didn't have any monitors then, but he would know what that was, what that shot was, what that lens did, and then we moved the camera on these long lenses. We moved it when some beautiful stuff on that. And I was guided by him, and obviously I worked collaboratively with him, and together I think I learned what another way of storytelling, and that stayed with me for a very long time. And it was a very dense, complicated story. Again, a lot of different locations all over the UK, and so I think
It sounds like you were able to spend some time with it, so it kind of manifests itself in a way. It sounds like.
Yeah. Yes. Exactly. I think it's one of those situations you don't know, like life. You don't know at the time what its influence is going to have on you later on. And I think we were just on this journey together, and you didn't really quite know at the time that it was some sort of like you use the word magic, but sort of we didn't know that something special happening. I do remember we were in North London after a very long day, and we were about 6 weeks in, and they rented a church hall, and because one of the things is the director, the people around the camera all know what we're doing, what we're trying to do, what we're achieving, but all the other people still getting up at crack of dawn, and working all these hours and working their socks off to produce what we're all producing, but they don't quite know. And I remember this: we went to this church hall, and they cut some sequences together and some dailies, and they projected some footage on the went to this church hall with the projector and screen, and the mood after that, because everybody then could see what we were doing, and then that carried us through. We started that in July, I think, and finished it in November. And but right through then, you could feel this momentum, that everybody knew we were on something special.
When they saw it, you knew something was going on there.
Yeah, I think they saw performances, the way we move the camera, the storytelling, and the pace of it. There's a very sort of confident when you can smell confidence on a movie sometimes, and confidence can be misplaced. But I think when it's there's a confidence in the storytelling that is confident in not the story, the script, and the acting, but actually the way you're getting this across to the audience is not self-congratulatory, self-conscious.
No, it's like an intuition. I mean, it makes sense. I mean, we've all been there where we sometimes you just, I mean, not to be lay, but if the vibe's right, there's not a way to articulate it or express it exactly in words, maybe, but it's something that we all experience or physically undergo.
Yes,
following
yes. You in life too. So that's my probably my special one, as it say.
Now my Bodyguard question was simple, but it would have probably done better back to Billie Holiday. But shooting, obviously that film became pretty quintessential for like Whitney Houston's career, among many things. And that song, but how did you apply, because you have some experience there that directly correlates to shooting that now obviously it's not a biopic, but the same style of film of capturing a strong performance with like a solo artist on stage. How did what you did in The Bodyguard apply to the United States versus Billie Holiday several years later, or did it?
Oh, see, I'm sure it did. But unbeknownst to me, I think we draw. I mean, there's a phrase I have, and it's been quoted back to me a few times, is that I try to start each movie as a virgin. So you endeavor to forget everything you know. So you're starting, as it were, pure. But what I say forget, you can forget things, but you can't unknow them. And there's a very clear distinction. So what you can forget, you actually still know, because it's part of who you are, your memory, psyche, it's deep in your memory. So again, when you say about Bodyguard related to Billie Holiday, many movies in between, and but there's still something in there with Whitney shooting those big setups of her performing.
I bet you got that feeling when you watched her do that.
I did. Yeah, it's short. What was really great was in prep we shot some of the music videos which you see in the movie.
Yeah.
We shot some of those in prep too, so that was pretty special. But
oh wait, you shot some of the music videos coinciding with it? That's pretty cool.
Yes, because we had to pre-shoot some of those that then were used in the film.
All right, yeah, it makes sense.
Like Queen of the Night, stuff like that. And actually, but it also one of the things I quote. One of my strongest memories in the Fontainebleau Hotel in Miami, we shot her singing that song, and I picked up a camera. I wasn't operating that movie, but I picked up a camera with 300mm lens on or something and did a close up of her singing that song. And all the truck, they were in a ballroom in this hotel, and she's on the stage. And there were the trucks outside recording this, and she did it in one take, and that was the recording of that song. And I was there, privileged enough to actually watch it.
That's incredible. Now I got it in my mind. The whole thing, my image now is you're on the plane. There's someone in front of you watching The Bodyguard. You see it from the distance. Yes. You walk up to me, tap him on the shoulder, and you're like, "I shot that shit."
I don't think that's in my. But yeah, it's interesting approach. But so each one. Although I said about my sort of phrase of forgetting everything, you start fresh as you don't. So something from each one gets through deep in your RAM or your memory or whatever, and you use all this stuff. You don't always know you're using it, but you do.
All right, makes sense.
How has your approach to lensing changed over the years? Both in terms of artistic choices and available technology.
Oh yeah, great question. I used to be very purist about prime lenses, fixed focus lenses, and I was very clear about that. I would carry zooms, but I wouldn't be very, using them. In fact, I remember on a film called Ever After, Cinderella film with
Drew Barrymore. I remember that as a kid. That was a good
one. And I remember the operator coming to me once and saying, "Can we use a zoom on this?" So it's. So that was quite sort of even, quite purist, I say. And but the person who changed that for me actually was Robert Altman on Gosford Park.
Oh, Gosford Park is a great film. Yeah, that was one of your favorite films to work on, and you've said in previous interviews, right?
It is. It was very special, and it just just talk about him. So hairs at the back of my neck. We got on great, and we were very fond of him. Or each other, fond of each other. And he Vilma shot that, I think, but there are a lot of zooms within that. So we use zooms at Gosford Park, but I was very keen because in Gosford Park, one of the conceits of it is every shot in the movie, the camera's moving. It's not one static shot the whole movie. So that's one of our conceits.
I didn't notice that. That's not now. I gotta watch it again.
You don't really notice it. It's quite subtle, but so within those camera moves, there are zooms, and again, I didn't want because in Long Goodbye, almost film, you see the zooms, and they're there for dramatic purpose. But Gosford Park, I didn't want to make sure that each one you had a zoom, but it's very hidden and just used for dramatic. And so he basically question about lenses and how it changed over is that was a big sea change for me, going from sort of prime zones to actually zooms are pretty good. So it could be very useful. Obviously, way back in documentary, using documentary 60mm, use zooms a lot. And then going on from that, I think now there are a lot of great choices in lenses, and we don't have to be quite so careful in the widest aperture of them because digital, you can use less light, so you can still work with a lens at 2.8 or whatever it is, and they'll get a good image. And there are a lot of great modern lenses have come out, which are terrific. So I think, again, like earlier talking about cameras, we're doing film cameras, 8mm, 16, 35, VistaVision, IMAX, all those different film formats, plus all the plethora of digital cameras and formats you can shoot. And the same thing with lenses. But having said that, I think the lenses that, from what I call way back when, were made by humans with human hands, and the sensibilities, the actual glass and the way they're put together by humans rather than computers. So many lenses now are made, assembled and designed by computers, obviously, but they don't have that sort of texture.
Yeah, if it's got like just that like a little bit of difference in like maybe the lens speed has like its own peculiarity to it, something like that, kind of cool.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can put peculiarities, but actually sort of little faults in them. But you're looking at technicalities of a lens, and a computer, because it's taught not to, it won't have any faults in what it perceives as faults. But you have a lens made in 50s or 60s by some guy in a workshop in Leipzig or somewhere. Then it's going to. But Dan Sasaki in Panavision in Woodland Hills.
Yeah.
So many people, and I've done it with him. He will disassemble a lens and rebuild it in a way that is, or get different lenses together, one set of lenses and different lenses, and make a special lens for a particular production.
Yeah, have you ever had to have that done? Have you been like, this is something I want to capture, but it doesn't quite exist?
Yeah, I played. He's helped me, and I played with.
Give an example.
Well, actually, interestingly, on the first book club, and I've done it 2 or 3 times. But the first book club, you want to obviously give them the best look, women of a certain age, the best look they could have, but also to make the lenses have this human quality. So there was an element in them where it would give it a slight distortion. So for the backgrounds would have a slight distortion, but spherical lenses have a little anamorphic distortion to them on a highlight or something in the background. Don't ask me how he did it, but he understands. He's a genius, and he understands what you're trying. You can never get hold of him because he's so popular and so much in demand. But he understands what overly with me with director. He understands what cinematographers want in their storytelling quest, and will then adapt glass and lenses to what the requirement is for this particular storytelling. And to go into the question, lenses have got better, but better is a very subjective term, very subjective word. And what is better in the eye of a computer that's designing and therefore making a lens isn't necessarily the best lens for when the audience, which is what it's really all about, is watching your work, and not just your work, but the whole story they're watching and trying to get involved in. And so you want to make lenses that have, I keep going back to the same thing, have this human aspect to them.
That's pretty wild. I didn't know that. That's an interesting thing to know. Now, 2 more questions. We'll let you go. Promise. Thank you for bearing with us. How do you now? I do want to ask this one because you've worked on, like say a good example. You worked on Monkeybone, correct?
Yep.
Okay, so how do you approach balancing like digital and practical effects in camera as the years have gone? Like, how would you have dealt with it then versus something you would have to deal with now?
Yeah, I mean, Monkeybone was virtually all practical physical effects, and it was a film. I don't talk too much about it, but it's quite an interesting journey for me, that particular project. That was with another genius director called Henry Selick, who had done James and the Giant Peach, Nightmare Before Christmas, and then subsequently did Coraline. And his skill was stop motion animation. That's what he did. But this was the first time he was working with live actors, real actors.
Well, so you had to incorporate. How was the learning process fusing that together, working together with him?
Well, this was very interesting for him because Henry's sensibilities are really precise, and of course, actors aren't always as precise as you want to be. We know that as cinematographers and focus pullers certainly know it. They don't do the same thing twice, and so there's a sort of but but that was a very, very interesting. Monkeybone, coming to your question, is mostly kind of very. I think we would approach that quite differently now. That may be a good answer. One of the answers to your question is that what then we did were all practical effects in the studio, but of course now, or not just now, but say 10. This was.
It was like 20 years ago or so now, isn't it?
Yeah, it was. I think when it was my son. It was 25 years ago. Actually,
Okay.
because my son is now 27. Was to his second birthday on that movie, and my son's now a writer director. My daughter's an actor, and both in the business.
As I see, yeah, you have your whole family's been in the business. Your father worked at MGM, so it's you got a family legacy going on. That's what's up.
Yeah, it's becoming so. So Henry is into very much practical effects, but of course now it wouldn't necessarily be. We could embellish. I know one of the issues we had on the big set of Monkeybone was how to make the edges of the set fall off into infinity, and because the set was built right to within about 6 feet of the edge of the stage, but then you're trying to make the outside of the set on the stage walls look like infinity, as though this whole set was floating in space somewhere.
Yeah.
In Brendan Fraser's characters, he's in a coma, so it's all his imagination. So this thing is floating in between life and death, and he's in his coma. So that's what we're trying to create. So of course now, with all sorts of huge, wonderful visual effects, that now would be able to create whatever Henry required out there, rather than just infinite blackness, which was quite tricky to do at the time practically. So now, answering your question, is I can remember the last thing they did without any visual effects, but even now the simplest movie we do, even the smallest budget ones, there's some element of visual effects within them, which can get you just an extra bit of what you see out a window or don't see out a window, or you can extend a set somewhat a little bit or whatever. But hopefully I'm not the school that would ever say that we can fix this in post, because I think it can become very lazy. I think I've become very lazy camera-wise, lighting-wise, everything else. And so this is my crew. If you ever hear me say, we'll fix this in post, take me out and shoot me.
No, but I understand, especially because sometimes you go to fix it in post and you're like, damn, we got to go get the camera, go back out there. We can't fix it in post.
Do it properly now, if you can. But anyway, so your question about visual effects, how it's changed, I think it's become much more economical now, and you can use it on small films just to help some bit of the background or whatever it is. And of course, the whole DI part of that, the DI, what a colorist and the DI, some of these brilliant colorists I work with, DIs, can do fantastic things to help you out a little bit. Not fix in post, I hasten to say, but help you out a little bit in post and the DI.
Well, they finish your work. I mean, if you've colored it, I mean, you've shot it, they color and grade it and gloss it,
They do, yes. And hopefully, I think it hopefully embellishes and you don't lose something. But so, yeah, I think visual effects has changed, and that is 25 years since Monkeybone, and I think it's exponential what's possible quite economically, actually, and help you with things like wig line. Because the thing about digital, it shows up all sorts of things on film wouldn't necessarily show up. You could have a wig line on shooting on celluloid, and you wouldn't necessarily see it, get away with it. But digital will show up everything. So some of these things you then might need a little bit of help, should we say, in post through call it visual effects. But visual effects, I think, for me, it covers a whole multitude of things, from huge, like from Gladiator 2, particularly the set extensions and building sets outside, and even I watched some of 1923, the Taylor Sheridan TV series, and obviously a good sized budget on that, but it's still high-end TV, and the visual effects in that's incredible.
Yeah.
Incredible. Mm-hmm.
Well, Andrew, one more question. I would, and this one's, I would feel is probably relatively superficial, but it's our way to lead out. I wanted to say thank you, of course, as well for coming on the show. But looking back on your career, is there a particular film, or I think it would be hard to say a single shot, but is there a particular one that you feel best encapsulate? Which one defines you best? Is there one, or?
I don't think there is. I think I have tried to not get typecast ever. I think like actors can. It's easy for us to get typecast, like the guy who did Madison George or Gosford Park or Bodyguard or Hot Rod even, or
you did Hot Rod with Andy Samberg.
Yeah, that was great. These guys, 27 years old, they were fantastic, and it's had a great life. One of the things about the best you can hope for a film is it has a good life afterwards, and that's one of the ones that has had a good life. LA Story had a great life, and Precious is a great one. Perks of Being a Wallflower is one very close to my heart. So there are a bunch of us, but it's very, because each one is like having children. You can't say this one is my favorite over other ones. There's some I don't own up to doing, shall we say?
Yeah.
Yes. But I don't want to finish on a negative note. So I think they're all special in my heart, and I've always learned something on them. I've loved the process of doing them and working in this collaborative medium we work in, and sharing and trying to learn what I do it better each year, and to share what we do in a seamless, beautiful way with the audiences around the world. And if any of those films has a life, then that's even better. I think some of them have had a very good life.
Well, you have definitely made several fantastic films that have had quite an impact on many lives. I know that, even before this interview, even looking through some, many of them had already been in my arena throughout my life, and Ragan's, and there's been more since. So we're very thankful to you for all the hard work that you've done. We appreciate you coming on the Ghost of Hollywood tonight. And
thank you so much for taking the time.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for having me, and I really appreciate it. I've enjoyed it.
All right. And I'm Poxy Leonard here with Miss Ragan. We've been speaking with Director of Photography and Cinematographer Andrew Dunn. We'll be back after these messages.
Interested in television or movies?
Then check out The Ghost of Hollywood for the best in cinema-related podcast at theghostofhollywood.com or wherever you get your podcast. Welcome back to The Ghost of Hollywood. I'm Poxy Leonard here with Miss Ragan, and we've just wrapped up a lovely conversation with Director of Photography, Andrew Dunn.
I can't believe you with that bodyguard on the plane scenario.
Whatever. That was like the smartest thing I've probably ever said in an interview.
Is there a smartest thing you've ever said?
You like my new Dusty Road sweater?
Poxy, you are so ADD.
We didn't say nothing. I mean, it's a badass sweater.
This has absolutely nothing to do with the show.
Yeah, but sorry. Anyway, shout out to Andrew for making the time to join us on tonight's show. Also, big thank you to his publicist, Marilyn, for setting up everything and making it all possible.
A big thank you to Chris, Simon, and Lennox for all of their hard work on this episode. And of course, thanks to all of you out there for tuning in and all of your constant support of The Ghost of Hollywood.
That's right, wall crawlers. Without you, there would be no me. And for that, I thank you.
Don't put your existence off on the listeners, Poxy. We're trying to keep this show going, and it's not their fault that Zach won't do the right thing and fire you.
That's because Zach would be nothing without me. Nothing, I tell you.
Yeah, I hear ya. All right, everybody. That's it. We'll be back in a few weeks with a brand new episode as we continue making our way through Season 4. For more episodes or information, you can visit our website at theghostofhollywood.com. You can also stream The Ghost of Hollywood wherever you get your podcasts.
Oh, yeah, that's right. So tell your mother, tell your brother, tell your...
Poxy!
Sorry. I get a little anxious sometimes, a little excited, a little carried away. All right, wall crawlers, until next time.
Good morning and good night.
And tell your mother.
Oh my
tell your
God,
father.
stop!
You've been listening to another episode of The Ghost of Hollywood. The Ghost of Hollywood was created by Zach and Ragan Flannery. The show is written by Chris Clawn, Zach Flannery, Ragan Flannery, and Simon Flannery.
The show is mixed by Lennox Flannery at Electric Garden Studios in Vancouver, Washington. The show is mastered by Grady Sizemore and Microphonic Meltdown in Portland, Oregon. For more information, please visit theghostofhollywood.com.